Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning, and welcome back to Morning Musings, and Happy New Year. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Hope you had a fantastic Christmas. Hope you had a very enjoyable New Year's Day. Uh, Day before yesterday, December the 31st, was my birthday, and I didn't get a new Shelby Mustang. Drat. Oh well, maybe next year. But I hope Santa was good to you. Uh, okay, I got this bronze eagle my wife bought me. I love eagles, all right, sculptures and what have you. Not that I have very many of them. So many of them are very expensive if they're of any quality whatsoever. But as you can see, that's a relatively small one, but it is genuine. Uh, and she didn't pay much money for it. It was kind of a clearance type item. I think she paid $20 for it, maybe, but anyway. So, anyway, once again, thank you so much for joining me. We do appreciate you being visitors here and watching our morning musings. We're seeing an uptick in our views. We've had a couple of videos just recently with well over 1,000 views. We're extremely thankful for that and want to urge you, all right, when you view these YouTube videos on Facebook, please hit the like button, hit the share button. Let people know, because we're sharing information on these videos that is extremely, extremely important. And it's genuinely good news about the faithfulness of God in keeping his promises. Okay, so we're continuing our summation of our study of the Olivet Discourse. We spent 2 years basically in an in-depth study of the Olivet Discourse. I'm going over some highlights for recapitulation purposes, for refreshment purposes, so that we can understand some of the key issues that are involved. We're in chapter 25, 1 to 13, about 5 wise, 5 foolish virgins. Now, the focus of our study is on the issue of the wedding. Obviously, you have the bridegroom coming for his wedding, coming for his bride. Now, what I have asked you to consider is, whose wedding is this anyway? Well, the traditional view is, well, this is the wedding of Christ and the church. Well, that's partly true. Ephesians chapter 5, 25 and following. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church. And he gave himself for it, that he might sanctify it and cleanse it with the washing of water by the word. Here, Paul sets forth the church as the bride of Christ. The great tragedy comes in. I was guilty of this for years and years and years. The great tragedy comes in when we see this as an event at a time and at a place totally divorced, pun intended, from God's Old Covenant promises made to Old Covenant Israel. You see, I was raised in the environment, in the theological environment, that said God was through with Israel at the cross. God was through with the old law covenant at the cross. Beginning on Pentecost and forward, God was dealing exclusively with the church. Now, it might be true, it was taught and still is. Yeah, the initial converts to the church were all Jews. But that's not all that important. Actually, it is crucially and fundamentally important. Because you see, in the Old Testament, Israel is depicted as the bride of Yahweh. However, the 10 northern tribes, after abandoning the 2 southern tribes, became apostate and committed spiritual adultery. Hosea chapter 2, whole book of Hosea, actually. As a result of that, God divorced her. Write her a bill of divorcement. She is not my wife. I am not her husband. Hosea chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. And God threatened that in the last days, Judah would likewise be put away. Why? Well, because she too was unfaithful. And thus we come forward several centuries at the time of Jesus, and Jesus' ministry was to Judah and Benjamin. And he calls Judah, Jerusalem, the wicked and adulterous generation. She was doing exactly, slightly different forms, but same problem, what the 10 northern tribes had done. And so God labels her an adulterous wife. Well, what does that mean? It means that God was going to put Judah and Jerusalem away, divorce her, just like he had done with the 10 northern tribes. As I shared with you, the picture that we get in the book of Hosea is that God said he was going to divorce the 10 northern tribes. He was going to depart from them, and he was going to put them to death. Guess what? That's exactly what you find in the New Testament. But God also promised that in the last days, he would betroth Israel to himself again. He would make a new covenant. Well, that new covenant is a new marriage covenant, ladies and gentlemen. Failure to see the wedding marriage or the wedding concept strictly and solely within the context of a new covenant is a massive failure. It's an exegetical and hermeneutical failure. And again, the question is, who did God promise to remarry? It wasn't a brand new people, unrelated to the old. No. God said he was going to make the new covenant, Jeremiah chapter 31, 29 and following, with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. That's right. After divorcing Judah, God was then going to make the brand new wedding marriage covenant with the whole house of Israel. But it was going to be a radical transformation. He wasn't going to remarry all 12 tribes under the same form, that is, a nationalistic, geopolitical, quasi-military type of kingdom. No. Israel was to be transformed into the body of Christ. And that's so incredibly important. So we come to the New Testament and we find that one of Jesus's very favorite topics is the marriage. Matthew chapter 22, a great king, or a king made a great wedding feast. A what? A wedding feast for his son. Folks, do you suppose, and upon what basis would we make an argument, but do you suppose this is a different wedding from that promise in Hosea 2:19 and following? Is it a different wedding, a different marriage from that promise in Isaiah chapter 62, in which Yahweh, speaking to all 12 tribes now, said, you will no longer be called forsaken, but you shall be called Hephzibah. You shall be called Beulah. And as a young man rejoices over his wife, so I will rejoice over you. And when would that be? That would be at the coming of the Lord in the restoration of Jerusalem. The word restoration there, reformed, in the Septuagint is diorthosis. It's the word that Hebrews uses to say that the old covenant would be valid until the diorthosis, which is the time of the new covenant. Okay? But in Isaiah chapter 62, behold, your salvation is coming and his reward is with him. Okay, the wedding is at the coming of the Lord. Okay, when would that be? Now remember, here's Jesus in Matthew chapter 25, talking about the coming of the Son of Man for the wedding. When would that be? Well, it's the coming of the Son, the coming of the Son of Man. Well, here's one thing we know about the coming of the Son of Man. In the Old Testament, the only prophecy that we find about the coming of the Son of Man, and specifically the coming of the Son of Man on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, is from Daniel chapter 7. And that was to be in the days of the fourth empire, which was Rome. So when we kind of connect these dots here, what we have is the promise of the wedding in the days of Rome, the coming of the Son of Man. When would it be? Well, once again, it would be the coming of the Lord with his reward to reward every man. Well, this is amazing. Matthew chapter 16, verse 27 and 28. Verse 27 is virtually a direct echo of Isaiah chapter 62, 10 and following. The Son of Man will come in the glory of the Father with his angels and shall reward every man according to his works. Sound familiar? Well, it's both Isaiah 40, 10 and following, but it's also Isaiah 62, 10 and following. Do you catch the power of that? So here we've got this old covenant promise made of the last day's wedding, the remarriage, if you please. And here is Jesus reiterating, echoing that direct promise, directly echoing that promise. So Matthew 16, 27 is the same promise of Matthew chapter 25. Got that? Oh, but wait. Matthew chapter 16, verse 27 goes with verse 28. The Son of Man will come in the glory of the Father with his angels and shall reward every man according to his works. And verily I say unto you. Folks, it's absolutely astounding to me to see the verbal gymnastics of the commentators. They take verse 27, oh, that's the end of time. That's the marriage between between Christ and the church, not Israel, at the end of time. At the end of the Christian age. That means it's the end of the new covenant age. Well, if it's the end of the new covenant, then it's the divorcement of the church. You know, the end of the covenant is the end of the marriage. So if you posit the wedding of Christ at the end of the Christian age, i.e., the end of the new covenant age, that means it's the divorcement. That doesn't work well, does it? Verse 28. Verily I say unto you, there are some standing here which shall not taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Folks, that's Jesus' promise to come for the wedding in fulfillment of Hosea, in fulfillment of Isaiah, in the lifetime of those first century people. Unless you want to argue that we have 2,000-year-old people running around waiting for the end of the endless Christian age, waiting for the end of the new covenant. And, you know, Jesus said, heaven and earth shall pass away. My word, that's the new covenant. That's the new marriage covenant. But unless you want to say that the wedding is at the end of the new covenant, endless new covenant, at the end of the endless Christian age, then you got to admit that Jesus is coming for the wedding was going to be in the lifetime of those people at the end of the old covenant, the first marriage covenant. Tomorrow, on the flip side, I'll share with you how the book of Revelation puts this wedding in a very, very specific context. You don't want to miss it. Okay? Once again, Happy New Year. I'll see you on the flip side.